America First Roundtable. It's been a heck of a 4 years here at AFPI, and we're proud of many of the things that have happened. We have 81 team members that have now gone to the administration. We have 64 new folks, all in the span of 6 months, hence a little bit more gray hair than there might have been 6 months ago, but a lot of impact, and we're going to talk about that. But when we were thinking about, okay, what is the first America First Roundtable we really want to talk about that we're most proud about? There's a lot of things to be proud about with our America First movement, what President Trump has done, just that man personally, what he's represented to this country, what he's literally saved the country and probably saved the planet while he's at it. But we're so proud of many of the accomplishments. The humanitarian catastrophe that we saw play out over 4 years on our southern border has almost nearly been solved completely in terms of that border flow daily. A voice for the forgotten men and women of America that is now back, which means things like no tax on tips and no tax on Social Security, a rejection of wokeness, right at the top of the list of the things we should be proud about. Who would have believed? We talked for decades, Marty Denenfelser's here, we talked for decades about defunding NPR and PBS. Guess what? It just happened. Another thing we talked about for decades is defunding the grotesque organization founded by Margaret Sanger called Planned Parenthood. They've also been defunded. And of all the things that we're proud about, and when we chose the first roundtable, we're so proud of Erica and Lindsay and so many others, and I would be greatly remiss if we didn't mention a giant whose shoulders we're standing on today, who will be laid to rest next week, Dr. Ed Follner, the founder and the president of the Heritage Foundation. These individuals fought for years for educational freedom to break the education cartel, the heartless cartel that has kept parents and students in failing schools with no hope, all because of greed and power. And that cartel, I'm 46 years old, for 43 years of my 46 years, there has never been a state with the universal school choice program, and the America First movement has asserted itself first in the states, now nationally, led by the unbelievable Secretary of Education, Linda McMahon. And would you believe that here this morning, over the last 3 years, we've gone from 0 states to 17 states with universal school choice. Unbelievable job. So we're proud. We're going to tell that story today. We're so proud of Erica Donalds, who only wears 2 hats at AFPI. Given time, there'll be a third, although I think there's another hat coming your way in January of 2027 when Florida has a new First Lady.
Yes.
And what she's done, and so I want to welcome everyone here. I want to thank our brother Frank Murphy, chair of Athletes for America, one of our great leaders, the antidote to Colin Kaepernick, and the people. And I want to thank Stacy Shefflin, the chair of America First Women. And so without further ado, I want to introduce our president and CEO, Greg Sindelar, the man that keeps this all together here at AFPI in such a capable way through humble servant leadership. Ladies and gentlemen, Greg Sindelar.
Yes.
Thank you all. Round of applause for Martin Gillespie.
Yes.
I'm glad to know he's redundant. Do something with his salary or something. It is a pleasure to be here. It's a pleasure to be, especially working with Erica and Stacy, Frank, and the work, Lindsay, that you're doing. A lot of people always ask, like, why are you in this? And as a father of 2 whose kids are off at some museum on the mall in Parental, I'll get pictures in a second of the fun they're having while we are here. But it's because education is foundational to everything that we do. And we've seen for too long that the educational system has not served the best interests of this country and the best interests of our children. And, the great news with the settlement with Columbia University last night on the heels of what's happened at Pennsylvania and Harvard. And, we're starting to see we're at an inflection point where things are changing in this country. And for many years, you know, I'm a proud Texan. I think everyone here knows that. But we have not led on education in Texas. And when I remember having a conversation with some of our state leaders a few years ago about school choice, and it was mostly the answer I got was, you just can't do it in Texas. It's not possible. Texans don't want it. Even though everything we'd hear as we go around the state and talk in rural communities, urban communities, and suburban communities is that, no, we do want opportunity. But it was this movement, Erica's been, and Lindsay have been such an important part of, that really lit a fire that made it possible in Texas, where it finally just passed a few months ago, school choice in Texas. It still seems surreal to me that it's happening in Texas, but it's going to change the lives of thousands of kids, and I think the cascading effect that it will have on the education systems around the state, around the country, because of what's happening not only there but in other states, will just be felt for generations. And of course, Florida has always seems to lead the way on that. As a Texan, I have to admit, you know, Florida seems to be getting it right, Erica, on education. You know, and then what this administration is doing, and underscoring what Martin said, what Secretary McMahon is really leading the charge in devolving education back to the states and making sure that our education system is meant to educate our children. And we're losing whole generations of kids. You know, I'll give you a quick stat before I introduce Erica. In Texas, we saw that 32%, almost 33%. The 32% of kids when they graduated high school were not in college, they were not in the military, they were not in the workforce. We're losing kids. And the societal impact of that loss, we don't even know what that will mean. But it will not be good for this country if we don't get this back on track. And I'm so proud of this administration and the people involved and the people around the state, especially people like Erica, that are leading the way and ensuring that education gets back to educating our children, breaking down the cartels that are profiting off the backs of our kids, and making sure that we actually now start to deliver what we're supposed to. So, but you didn't come to hear me talk, you actually want to hear the experts talk, and there is no better expert than my colleague and friend, Erica Donalds. I have a very long bio for you here, Erica. But knowing Erica, I think the most important thing that she would say, besides that she's extraordinarily passionate and knowledgeable, you probably see her on Fox News and everywhere else talking about education. But at her heart, she is a mom who cares about the future for her kids and the future that for all kids, not just in Florida, but around the country. And we're just so blessed to have her here at AFPI and have her vision and her intellect driving all of this forward. So please help me welcome the one and only Erica Donalds.
Thank you. And thanks so much for being here, everyone who came today, and showing how passionate you all are about school choice, education freedom, the reforms, and the America First movement in education that we're watching before our very eyes under the Trump administration. And I'm really grateful to be part of America First Policy Institute. I've been around here since January. We have seen so many successes. Thanks, of course, to the leadership that Greg, Chad, Martin, and others have provided, founded by, as you know, our Secretary of Education, Linda McMahon, and Secretary Brooke Rollins. They built such an incredible organization that has been so effective, and we've all watched the successes and the wins just pile up over the last 6 months, and we're excited to carry those wins, not just throughout the rest of the country, but to the states as well. And I want to also mention some of our growing education team that is here in the room. Chris Shorer, who's handling our higher education. Javon, who's just joined us as a policy analyst. Brian Kelsey, who's serving as our education campaign director. Mike Shires, who's not here with us, and we've got a couple more announcements coming. But really appreciate the investment that America First Policy Institute has made in education and the wins that we see ahead that we're going to talk about today. I also want to start with just focusing on why we're doing this. Why are we here? It's because these reforms and breaking the education cartel and giving parents education freedom means something to parents and students in our country. And that's why we brought a couple a parent, teacher, and students here that we're gonna hear from quickly about why this work and what we're talking about here is so important. I want to introduce Javon Davis, who is an 11th grader, an exceptional student at Friendship Technology Preparatory Academy here in Washington, D.C. Javon's going to share with us a little bit about why school choice has made such a difference in his life. Thank you, welcome Javon. And I'm going to walk because we have one mic, so we're going to be efficient with passing it around here. Thanks for being here.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Ms. Donalds, for the warm introduction. My name is Javon Davis Jr., and I am proud to share that I will be entering the 11th grade this school year at Friendship Technology Preparatory Academy High School, located in our nation's capital. Let me take a moment to tell you a little bit about who I am, the school I attend, and how school choice has shaped my journey as a student and a young leader. Since 2016, when I first enrolled at Friendship Public Charter School in the 2nd grade, this network of schools has been more than just a place of learning. It's been a foundation for my growth, both academically and personally. From my early days at Friendship Southeast to my current experience at Tech Prep, I've been surrounded by strong teachers, caring mentors, and a school culture that challenges us to aim high and never give up. Today, I maintain a 4.0 GPA, which reflects my commitment to excellence and the high standards set by my school community. But Tech Prep is more than just grades and tests. It's a place that feels like home, a place where students are seen, heard, and celebrated. The staff at Tech Prep treats us with respect and push us to be our very best, not just in academics, but as leaders, citizens, and future change makers. Over the years, I've had the privilege of participating in activities like the Leadership Club, Student Government Association, and the Friendship News Network. These opportunities help me build confidence, communication skills, and a sense of responsibility to my school and peers. In 9th grade, I even tutored students in Algebra 1, an experience that not only strengthened my love for math, but also sparked my desire to teach one day. Recently, I was inducted into the National Honor Society, and this year I'll be managing social media for Tech Prep's amazing cheerleading team, the Bluebells, while balancing a rigorous academic schedule inclusive of several college courses. None of this would have been possible without the power of school choice. I live in Ward 8 in Southeast Washington, D.C., a community full of resilience, culture, and pride. My family made a decision to enroll me in a school that aligned with our values and gave me the opportunity to thrive. That school was Friendship Tech Prep Academy. At Tech Prep, I've been challenged, supported, and given the freedom to dream big. Their mission to prepare students for college, career, and life has shown up in every classroom, every teacher, and every experience I've had. School choice makes this possible. It gives students like me, students from communities that are often overlooked, the opportunity to attend schools that believe in our potential and are committed to our success. As a member of the class of 2027, when I graduate from Friendship, I plan to attend college to earn my bachelor's degree and later pursue both my master's and doctoral degrees. I also dream of returning to Friendship as a math teacher, so I can pour into the next generation of students the way my teachers have poured into me. I am also passionate about real estate and accounting, fields where I can make a difference in my community while pursuing my interests. To the leaders and policymakers in this room today, thank you for advocating for students and families to have access to high-quality educational options. I stand here today as proof of what's possible when students are placed in schools. Thank you.
Wow. Congratulations. That is incredible. And congratulations to your leaders. I think your Pat is here somewhere. Perhaps wave our friendship. There she is. Pat, give her a hug on her palm. Leader of the Friendship Schools. Amazing. All right, we also have Heather Dooley and her daughter Kaylee here. Heather is a longtime educator, 24 years, focused on classical education, was also once a homeschool mom. And so she's gonna talk about having been a teacher in a school choice environment, what that means to her, and also as a parent, and Kaylee's gonna say a few words as well.
Thank you. That's a tough act to follow. But good morning, everybody, and thank you for the opportunity to share today. Like Erica said, I'm here both as a teacher and a parent, and those two roles have impacted me deeply with education and school choice. I entered the teaching profession because I loved working with students and sharing my passion for education and especially literature. However, a few years ago, I was teaching in our local public school system, and I just became increasingly frustrated. And when I was told that there was rising pressure around the state testing, state test scores, and then the administration told us that we were no longer allowed to teach novels. We had to only use excerpts of passages and focus on improving the test scores. Y'all, it crushed my soul. And at the same time, my daughter was in kindergarten, and she, instead of enjoying school, she was struggling. And they were also focusing on test prep, even in kindergarten, and testing on computers and having to sit still all day. And she was overwhelmed and discouraged because she came home on yellow or orange every day. And so that spring, I made a big decision and decided to return to coaching cross country at a local university where I could homeschool her and also get to coach one of my older daughters who would be going there. So we homeschooled for 4 years, and while I valued that time, balancing homeschool with work and a lot of kids and all the things, it was challenging because rigor in education is very important to me. So my daughter graduated after those 4 years, college bill, check, and that's when I discovered Optima. And school choice in the state of Florida has been an absolute blessing to our family. As a teacher, school choice gave me the chance to reclaim my creativity and professional freedom. I now have the chance to get to do what I know as a teacher helps students learn best. And so I was able to create an immersive elementary Latin curriculum. I get to teach novels and grammar and inspire a love of reading in my students. I was able to fully integrate my ELA and history curriculum so that the students are engaged in it and retaining the information and making connections. And and differentiate my learning and all the things that we as educators want to do and long to do, but are not always able to do. As a parent, I've also watched my daughter transform. She went from dreading school, and that includes homeschooling with me, sadly, to actually enjoying learning again, or at least maybe she wouldn't go that far as to say enjoy, but not dreading anymore. So the online environment has really met her physical needs, giving her flexibility and allowing for some 504 accommodations like frequent breaks that allow her to stay engaged. And it's also met her social needs, which has been huge for us because we live in a very rural part of Mississippi where there is no school choice. By the way, there's no such thing there. But the immersive virtual reality spaces where she learns help her build relationships and make connections to people and to the stuff that she's learning. And also importantly, it's been academically effective for her. Without focusing on test scores and test prep, she's shown growth and she's doing well, and it's really working. And also on top of that, she's never complained about going to school. Not even in April. If any of y'all are teachers, when you know in public schools it's Operation Drill and Kill, and but she's persevered all the way through with a great attitude. So like I said, we live in Mississippi where school choice isn't really a thing and options for families aren't as extensive in Florida. But I'm so thankful that we had the ability to enroll her in Optima and that we had the ability to homeschool for those 4 years while I was working part-time. You know how that goes a lot of times. But those 4 years were financially difficult for us. I'm also married to a teacher, and we have 5 children. And so things like a federal tax credit or support for tutoring during that time really honestly would have been a game changer for our family. And that's why I believe that if done thoughtfully and equitably, expanding school choice could really provide opportunities for families who want to do what's best for their children, but they don't have any options. So whether that means a different school, flexible online learning, or additional support when traditional settings aren't a good fit. So thank you so much for listening to my story and for your work in shaping policies that can help families like mine, and that can also help teachers reclaim their creativity and spirit of innovation, because I do want to emphasize that it's not just parents who want change, it's the teachers too. So thank y'all.
And personally, I would say that the teachers are really amazing. They're really nice and they really do their best to help their students. And VR is a great way to learn because it's active. You're doing stuff like you would in a classroom. It's immersive and you get to be with people. And the delinquents can't ruin the class for everyone.
It definitely puts it into perspective of why we're here and why we do what we do. We are changing the lives of so many children and families and teachers. And I like to emphasize that school choice is not just for students, because teachers need the ability to teach in ways that they see fit in different environments. So thank you so much for being with us, all of you. I'm so honored to introduce my friend Lindsay Burke. Lindsay has spent decades in this school reform and school choice movement. She has advised governors, she's testified before Congress. I'm sure many of you have read some of her work on education reforms. She's a PhD in education policy, serves on several education boards, and we are so honored and glad and thankful that she agreed to go into the administration now as the Deputy Chief of Staff for Policy and Programs in the Department of Education. Please help me welcome Lindsay Burke for our conversation. I think when I found out that Lindsay was going into the administration, I think we were on a Zoom when you told me, and I may have jumped out of my chair, I'm not sure, but I know that you're going to make such a difference for our country and in such support of Linda McMahon and her team, so we're thrilled to have you. We're going to start with just to let you all know kind of what AFPI has been doing this year when it comes to state-led education. As you know, the department and President Trump has said they want to return education to the states, power to the states, and what does that look like? Well, recently we were involved in huge wins. Greg mentioned one in Texas, where $1 billion school choice program was passed this year, and AFPI was a big part of helping to support that and get that across the finish line. The very largest school choice bill on day one in the history of the country, so a huge effort from a lot of groups and individuals there. We were also a part of getting the Tennessee school choice bill passed this year as well. So just two very big wins that we want to celebrate. In this next year though, and we're going to talk about the One Big Beautiful Bill and the federal tax credit scholarship program that was passed there, huge celebration there. But we are going to be working with our state chapters and our partners in the states to ensure that every state, and my goal is 50 states. I'm not looking at red states or blue states. Every single state needs to be on our radar to ensure that every governor approves an ability to use the federal tax credit in their state. Our goal is not red states, blue states, half states, all 50 states. All 50 states to get that approved. So that's one of the things we're going to be focused on in the coming year. But Lindsay, why don't we talk about what was in the One Big Beautiful Bill when it comes to school choice and the federal tax credit? We'll start there.
Yeah. Great. I don't even know where to start. Thank you, Erica. That's great. It's so nice to be here at AFPI. Thank you for having me. And it's just been amazing. I mean, this administration is moving with lightning speed to accomplish so many education-related goals on just a variety of issue areas. But chief among them so far has been, we now say OB3, by the way, and One Big Beautiful Bill. So there's a little breaking news.
Saying the whole thing.
Somebody the other day in the office said, what if we went with OB cubed? And then we'd sound really smart. So anyways, you've got options on the table for referring to the One Big Beautiful Bill, which does included a federal tax credit scholarship, as Erica mentioned. And so What this does is it provides a $1,700 scholarship for two individuals, a credit to individuals who donate, and that credit is up to $1,700, potentially $3,400 for a married couple filing jointly. But those donations then go to scholarship granting organizations that provide a scholarship to a child to attend a private school of choice or other education option in their state. To Erica's very important point, it is now incumbent upon governors, and the ultimate decision is with governors to opt their states in to participate in this program. And it is universal in the sense that it is effectively uncapped at that point. So every state could decide to participate. As many $1,700 donations as an SGO can solicit, they can get, put in their SGO coffers, and then start providing scholarships. Time is of the essence, so this goes into effect in 2027. And so if you sort of backdate in your mind what that means for implementation, which is the phase that we're in now, and this does go over to the Treasury Department, so it's not the Department of Ed that will be managing this program, but there is an implementation timeline that we're all tracking, and that implementation timeline has to include things like the public comment period around it, rulemaking around the program, and then the ability for donors, individual donors, to start contributing in January of 2027 over that couple of month timeline, getting those donations as robust as possible to SGOs so that come April or May, SGOs can start thinking about what do these scholarships look like that our particular SGO is handing out to students, what parameters do we want to put around those scholarships, and then open up that application deadline and start getting scholarships in the hands of families by August.
Yeah.
So it is a tight timeline, but it is such an exciting opportunity. We could get way into the weeds about what all of that will look like over the next year or so. But the other thing that is a bit overlooked that was in OB3 is that there's also an expansion of 529 so that you can now contribute up to or withdraw up to $20,000 a year to go toward private school choice as a part of that 529 expansion. So huge expansions of school choice in that bill, coupled with, and I got to talk about Texas too, because it's just so amazing. I mean, this has
It's pretty amazing.
the white whale in the movement for so long, and to finally see it come to fruition. I heard one estimate that means 56% of kids nationally are now eligible for private school choice. I mean, that's a tipping point, right? We are at the point now where we can almost say there is no longer the monopoly-run, public, government-run education system that everyone has been unfortunately beholden to for so long. We have over half of kids in this country who are now eligible, at least, for private education options. So it's a real turning point, I think, and just a huge opportunity for states ahead of them, possibly.
Yeah, and to add to that, the 529 plans now also expanded the eligible expenses. And so Ted Cruz just recently had sponsored a bill to allow for private school tuition. It was at $10,000 now, thanks to the big beautiful bill, it's at $20,000. But in addition to that, in OB3, we're expanding the allowable expenses for 529s to homeschool expenses, online courses, certifications, dual enrollment. And so it's starting to look more like an ESA in terms of the types of expenses that can be used in a 529. And you may think, well, 529, that's strange, it's just a tax shelter. You may not have money in there for very long saving funds. However, that may be true, and you may not have funds in there for very long. But we see this potentially as another vehicle where states that are coming online with school choice programs, some who already fund 529s for their constituents, may be using that as a vehicle for distributing funds to parents in order to use them for those types of expenses. I do want to also reiterate, when it comes to the federal tax credit scholarship program, this is how a lot of school choice started in the states, with a tax credit scholarship, many of those focused on students with special needs or low-income students. We're going to be paying very close attention and involved in the rulemaking process. We want to see a lot of flexibility there, because when I say 50 states, it may be that a governor can't say no to more money for students with special needs. All right. Or low-income students. And so we are going to look for maximum flexibility, and perhaps even charter schools as well being able to take some of these scholarship funds to supplement their current funding, especially for additional services, tutoring, and the like. Somebody want to take this and see if we can get that going again? I'll turn it off.
I'll do it.
Let's see. Nope. Okay. Thankfully, I think I can talk really loud. I know Lindsay can as well. So I think it's important, and I've been calling President Trump the school choice president. I think he's rightfully earned that with the passage of the One Big Beautiful Bill, and we're just getting started because we are soon going to also be dismantling the Department of Education, and we're already well on our way to that. Oh, thank you. And before we get there, we also have some Dear Colleague letters that have come out that have also contributed in some ways to options for states to expand their school choice. I know you've got some other Dear Colleagues letter that you may mention, but we'll circle back to that because I know AFPI is working on specifically the one about unsafe schools and persistently dangerous schools. So let's talk about some of the Dear Colleague letters that have already come out.
So I had to actually print a list of all the work that's been going on.
Feverish.
It's been truly feverish. So you mentioned unsafe school choice option, but others where it's looking at more flexibility that states already have with some of their existing dollars that they might not either realize or have been encouraged to really think about how they can move those pots of money around and expand them for school choice options. So. But even just stepping away from the choice component of this, yesterday, I mean, the DCLs, the various guidances, notices of interpretation, investigations, I mean, it's just been nonstop. And so, even beyond just the school choice round yesterday, was it yesterday? All the days run together now. But yesterday we released guidance on artificial intelligence.
Oh, yes.
And so this is really important. I mean, we saw the president push forward a large initiative on AI yesterday, the action plan. And so there's a component of this, of course, at the Department of Ed. And I just wanted to highlight it because one key component of what the department put out is the responsible use of AI. And I know this is so important to families across the country that is front and center for us. And so not only that it is educator-led when it's used in the classroom, but that it's also that we have ethical use around the use of AI. So that parents should be there helping students navigate it when they use it, that students are learning maybe with AI, but not from AI exclusively in the classroom, that it's accessible, that it's transparent and explainable, and that among the most important things, it's data protective, that we are not collecting more student data, of course, complying with all federal privacy laws. So all of that was articulated yesterday in a letter that went out as well. I mentioned investigations. This, of course, was huge and top of mind for us on Title IX. We looked at discriminatory admissions in Fairfax County Public Schools. The Office for Civil Rights has been looking at the New York Board of Regents who tried to prevent a school district in New York from using a Native American mascot because they said it was a Title VI violation. And we said, no, it's not. It's actually they are honoring this mascot. And so it really runs the gamut of work there. Combating anti-Semitism. Columbia, of course, in the news this morning, Greg mentioned that. A settlement with Columbia University on what they're going to do moving forward to make sure that the rights of Jewish students on campus are protected. We have notified Harvard University's accreditor of violations concerning federal anti-discrimination laws, investigations into Minnesota and the Minnesota High School Sports League for allowing males to participate in female sports. We, of course, 2 weeks ago now, maybe 3, announced a voluntary resolution agreement with Penn, with the University of Penn, of course, for those Title IX violations. And that was really just an exciting day that UPenn not only entered into this voluntary resolution agreement, but apologized to the female students who lost their medals and lost their spots on teams, scholarships, etc., because of the participation of a biological male. So that voluntary resolution agreement, it was huge. We are doing a lot on the higher ed front as well to make sure that taxpayers are not left on the hook for illegal student loan forgiveness that have been promulgated by the Biden administration, that if you take out a loan as a student, you repay that loan, that it is your responsibility and not the responsibility of the federal taxpayer. And then, as Erica alluded to a minute ago, had a great holding from the U.S. Supreme Court 2 weeks ago, saying that the reduction in force that had been implemented at the Department of Ed could continue moving forward. So that means half the staff, roughly, who had been there during the Biden administration have moved along as a result of that reduction in force. So that was a pretty significant move. The last thing I'll say on just returning education to the states, from all of the work that we're doing. It was also announced earlier this week or late last week that we've entered into an interagency agreement, an IAA, with the Department of Labor to start sharing management of some labor programs, adult education programs, career and technical ed programs, where they have real expertise and can advance the goal of streamlining efforts at the department.
So many exciting things and promises made, promises kept, right? Exactly what President Trump said. I don't even know that we anticipated it would go as fast as it has. I mean, less than a week after Linda McMahon was confirmed, half of the department was gone. And then upheld. So yes, she doesn't play around, obviously. And thankfully that was upheld, as Lindsay mentioned, by the Supreme Court. And now we see that little by little, things are going to start moving, whether it's through congressional action. There was an article yesterday, I believe, in the Daily Caller where Linda had talked about some work that she's doing with Congress on taking parts of the department and either moving them to other departments or eliminating them or moving them down to the states. So there are 3 different options, but doing it in a very thoughtful and careful manner so as not to affect services for students. And that was also a promise that we're not going to stop the funding, we're not going to stop the services, but that they will be housed or accountable in a different area, mostly to the states. And I think it's so important as we're talking to people in our states who may be worried about this, that the funding, and as was demonstrated by the budget that came out, although the budget was cut, of course, in a small amount, but less compliance cost of implementing those programs. And so, just to use a few numbers here, it was estimated that 40% of the federal funding was used for compliance. And if the budget is then cut by 15%, but the compliance is eliminated, or the majority of that compliance is eliminated, well then the funding is actually higher for the states because you are taking away some of those red tape and bureaucratic costs that they were otherwise having to do. So the funding now is not as prescribed when it's going to the states, where before the states were being told you have to spend this much money on these type of students and this much on these type of programs. Now we're trying to say, you know what, here's the funding, you need to meet the needs of your students, and you do it in a way that you see fit, and you know what, you don't have to have as much reporting back to the federal government because you know what, they weren't even checking it anyway. So good news there. I did want to dig in just a little bit on the Dear Colleague letter around the persistently dangerous schools. Chris Shore did some great work on that. We've got a fact sheet on our website about the definition of persistently dangerous schools. Only 2 states in the country were actually following federal law. This is law that was already in place to identify the persistently dangerous schools in their states. And we're talking about, that means that in other states where shootings have occurred, rapes have occurred, assaults have occurred, they have not identified those schools as dangerous because the federal law requires that if they do, they have to provide public school choice for the students in those persistently dangerous schools. So we at AFPI are working on model policy to ensure that states are not only defining those persistently dangerous schools, especially those that have experienced shootings, assaults, murders, rapes, etc. on campus, but that they also have a public school choice policy, and if a public school of choice is not available, a private school choice policy that allows parents whose students are at those schools an option for a safe learning environment for their children. And these are things that are already in federal law and simply were not being enforced by the previous administration. I want to also touch on, I think it relates to the literacy initiatives, the civics initiatives, and maybe even some of the AI and innovation, the grant reorientations, because we have celebrated as the funding from the federal government from us taxpayers is no longer incentivizing schools to implement DEI policies, radical gender ideology policies. You know, what was happening in previous administrations is they were using our money to incentivize these schools to put in policies that we do not agree with and that were harmful to our children. Even if you think about the hiring policies that some of the higher education institutions, including Columbia, have now had to say, we're not going to do that anymore, were quotas for race, for gender. And that means that they were not hiring teachers based on merit. So how can we ensure that the best teachers are in front of our students if they're fulfilling quotas based on the color of someone's skin? So that was a very important change as well. So the grants have been reoriented to priorities of this administration. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I think you put it really well. It's exactly that. I mean, the president put out an executive order early this year prioritizing merit. And so looking through each and every one of these grants to make sure that they do, in fact, prioritize merit, that they don't have these, very, in some instances, illegal DEI metrics in them, and making sure that they're generally aligned. And that's an opportunity, I think, that the agency really has to make a significant footprint on, as you mentioned, not only how taxpayer dollars are spent, but the general orientation of education in this country. And if I could just step back for a second to the dangerous schools component too, I would just add to that, it's such a huge issue, right? We've known that for years, but I remember years ago we looked here in DC, and to hear you talk about DC public schools, I mean, it's been such an issue in the district with public schools. We know that about 1 in 8 students has been threatened with a deadly weapon while they're at school in DC. And so this has been just a huge issue that goes so under-identified. So being able to move that forward is great. But yeah, on the grant reorientation, it's a bigger deal, I think, than people recognize that it is. But to really be sure that we are, at the federal level, being good stewards of taxpayer dollars, and that those dollars are being sent out the door consistent with the administration's priorities.
Yeah, I know one of the wins that was announced, $600 million added to the charter school grant program, $60 million added to the charter school program grant pot of money that goes to those choice schools. And we saw double the number of applications for that program than in the previous administration. So not only additional funding, but with the reorientation of focus, more of those schools feel that they could qualify for those grants, because those grant applications are not easy. They take resources to fill out. And what we've seen even in the states as well, that if charter schools or schools of choice feel like they don't have a chance because maybe they're not ideologically aligned with the decision makers, they don't bother filling out the applications. So what does it tell you then that double the number of applications have come in this grant open period for applications is really great news, and we hope that a lot of those funds can now get into the hands of those choice schools, and they can expand their seats, because this expansion of school choice in the states comes with a problem, right? We don't have enough seats for the parents who are now taking advantage of these choice opportunities. We're seeing that in Florida, where last year over 500,000 students were participating in the scholarship program, and we see that's going to grow significantly in the fall. But every charter school, every private school has a wait list, and so we're hearing from parents all the time, I love the fact that we have these scholarships, but I really need a place for my child to go that's within a reasonable distance of my home. And so there's going to be definitely more effort on our part in our work in the states at AFPI to help incentivize new schools to come online or expansion of existing schools. And so important that the innovation is there as well. I think even with the school choice expansion that we've seen, when it comes with a lot of bureaucracy and red tape and compliance, you end up seeing replications of existing models and not a lot of innovation coming into the space. And so going back to the ESAs, education scholarship accounts, that allow for different types of purchases, not just tuition, but online programs, tutoring, where parents can really customize the education experience for their children. That also being in this tax credit scholarship program as allowable expenses, and now the 529s, we're changing the ecosystem into a place where now these choice programs are expected to be more customizable, more modular, and that's going to invite innovative educational programs into the space, into the free market where education is going to live here soon, where parents can now say, you know what, my child is very good at math, and they can just get on an online program and fly with their math program. I don't have to spend a lot of money or individual time on math. But they struggle in reading, and they need a little bit of more attention. So I'm going to take this pot of money, this ESA or this tax credit scholarship, and I'm going to buy an online math program, but I'm going to put them in a tutoring center where they have a small group for reading, and they're getting more individualized attention. Those are the types of customizations that we want to get to with parents, and it's going to allow for innovators in the education space to go, you know what, I don't need to sell to a district to get into education. I can create a product and market directly to parents because parents are now consumers and they have the ability to make decisions for their children. So we are entering a completely new frontier when it comes to parents in control of their students' education. It's very, very exciting. One thing that we hear a lot from our donors, our investors here at AFPI, from stakeholders, is the literacy crisis in America. I use the statistic all the time. 1 in 3 students are reading on grade level. We as a country should be furious. I have 3 children. If only one of them could read, how would I feel about that? I wouldn't want to be the person who would be responsible for that. But that's how angry that we should be as Americans, because this is our country and this is our future, and that is what's happening here. So talk to us about the national priority that the department has for literacy.
Yeah. So it's a priority. It's a very high priority. This is a back to basics approach that I think is definitely near and dear to the Secretary's heart. There's so much that the federal government, that prior departments have been doing that were really far afield from that very core goal of making sure that children can read and write proficiently. Stated differently, Erica, 70% of kids can't read proficiently. I mean, it is really a crisis, a national crisis, and it is a crisis that is here and now today, but it's been here for a long time. I mean, if you go back to 1965 when Lyndon Johnson launched his war on poverty, this was ostensibly the rationale, right? There is a huge gap between low-income children and more affluent peers. That gap is largely one that we see evidenced in reading. And the gap that existed then in 1965, the equivalent of 4 grade levels worth of learning between, it's called the 90-10 gap, the bottom and top 10 percentile of students by income, that 90-10 gap, 4 years worth of learning and reading in 1965, it's exactly the same today. There's a 4-year gap in reading between low-income kids and their more affluent peers. Nothing has changed. It hasn't improved at all. Of course, COVID exacerbated some of that. However, it's been amazingly unwavering since the 60s. And so this was part of the rationale, part of it, not entirely, but for having more federal intervention in education. We ultimately get a federal Department of Ed when Jimmy Carter comes in 1980. I mean, all of this reading was really a key component of the argument, even though it was, of course, a nod to the teachers union when the department was created in 1980. But nothing that has transpired over the past 60 plus years has moved the needle, right? Not the war on poverty, not the creation of the Department of Ed, not the signing of No Child Left Behind. Nothing we have seen has moved the needle on improving literacy outcomes. What are we seeing? We're seeing other countries internationally start to move ahead of us in terms of reading achievement. And we're seeing this have a real impact on the day-to-day lives of so many Americans and on the economy writ large. And so it's a huge priority for the department to be laser focused on not only returning education to the states and families, but what can we do to actually improve those reading outcomes. So more to come on that. You're going to see a lot of activity, I think, around improving reading and improving literacy outcomes over the next few months, but it's a top priority.
Well, not only are we seeing in other countries they've learned how to resolve this issue, but Louisiana and Mississippi have also figured this out, it seems. And we know what needs to be done, but the education cartel, has blocked all efforts of reform and science-based reading initiatives. And Amanda Martin's here, who has a wonderful tutoring program as well in some of these states where we've seen incredible gains. So there are a lot of great innovations out there. There are a lot of programs out there that are carrying the science of reading to students, but the education cartel has helped to block that for many, many years. We're going to be working to break that, and I appreciate the work of the department. So we're gonna finish up here on the topic of the NEA. And speaking of the education cartel, then we're going to take a couple of questions. But a bill was just introduced to revoke the national charter of the National Education Association. Yes. And I want to tell you, this is somewhat ceremonial, but there are 2 major shock waves that we can send throughout the country against the work of the teachers union and what they've done to destroy public education in this country. But the first one is, of course, passing this bill and taking away their federal charter, any recognition at the federal level that they deserve to be recognized. at the federal level. They are a political organization. 99% of their donations go to left-wing Democrats. And if you look at their agenda for their conferences, for the professional development, if you want to call it that they give to teachers, it is all about radical ideology. It is not about student achievement. They have long left student achievement and academic performance behind, unfortunately, and they are not representing the interest of students or of teachers for that matter, and I think many teachers would agree with that. So very much in favor of that bill. Of course, it would require 60 votes in the Senate, so it's going to be very difficult to get across right now. But the other blow to the NEA and to other teachers' unions is the dismantling of the Department of Education. I'm going to let Lindsay talk about why that is so important, but you will see them, and you have seen them, screaming about this, that it is the end of public education if we get rid of the Department of Education. Lindsay, is that true?
We don't have much time left, but we can just level set real quick and say, remember that only 10% of K-12 education comes from the federal taxpayer. So it is, and by no means is this dismantling education. It is dismantling an ossified federal agency that really was a handout to the teachers union. I started to mention it a second ago, but when Jimmy Carter was running for president, he made two promises. He said, I will elect Walter Mondale as my running mate. Walter Mondale's brother was a higher up in the teachers union, lo and behold. And so he checked that box. And he said, of course, I will make education a cabinet level agency. And so that got the endorsement of the teachers union. It was the first time they had done a presidential endorsement, and Carter got his way and made it to the White House. And so that's the quick history of how the department came to be. And so it is tied in. And important when we have a conversation around the NEA's charter, and 100% agree. I mean, there's a sort of ceremonial flavor to revoking the NEA's charter, but it is important. The NEA, I think it was, don't quote me, but I think it was about 1906 when they got their congressional charter, so they've had it for a long time. Congress doesn't just dole these out willy-nilly. Or other organizations that have them are non-political, to your point. It's groups like, non-political, but it's groups like Scouting for America. It's groups like the Little League Association, right? They have a congressional charter. You don't see Little League of America endorsing presidential candidates, right? This would be weird. And yet, the NEA does. And in fact, Congress stopped doing congressional charters at all in the 80s. And so we are, I think, way past time. I mean, at the point when the NEA endorsed Carter, it was probably the time in 1979 to think about revoking their charter. But either way, we're here now. Very important effort, so we'll see how it plays out.
And as Lindsay mentioned, the Department of Education, not only is it only 10% of funding nationally, and I would argue you could probably cut 10% of every single public school budget and not affect a single child if you prioritize it properly. But it has not delivered on any of the promises that it was intended for, certainly hasn't helped increase student achievement. So we're not going to listen to them on that. Now, we are going to take a couple of questions, and we do only have one microphone, so I'm just going to ask you to speak up. We'll take this one over here. Start.
I just have a question about the unions. I think we're so very excited that they're being taken down, but what are the next steps that maybe in places like blue states or, we have the NJEA, and they're like the biggest one. What can we do to take them down? That's very important.
I'll leave that one to you. I'll talk quickly just about colleges of ed. I think this is a big connection point that's often disconnected from the conversation around unions. So I remember being in various colleges of ed and walking through the halls, and there were advertisements, right? Join the NEA, join the AFT, whatever it was in your state. And so the colleges of ed, of course, not only are they a pipeline to K-12 schools, but just the way that they have been structured over the years, they have created this pipeline of support for the teachers unions as well. So there's this sort of nefarious pact, I would argue, between them. So what states can do, and it's hard if you're in a blue state, admittedly, is they can start to think about reforming their state-based teacher certification requirements to make it much easier to become a teacher so that you don't have to go through a captured university-based college of ed, which is wholly captured by the unions. And so that's just another pressure point. I would say the bigger issue, though, is just talking to teachers about the fact that they don't have to join a union in order to get the protections that they are understandably concerned about. You don't have to join a union to get personal liability protection, but that's often how the union sells you on joining it. And so I think it's just walking them through the options that they have and literally just doing a campaign in the states about the options that teachers have that are non-union.
Yeah, and we've gotten some great Supreme Court decisions, such as Janus, that ensure that teachers do not have to join a union. They're not required to join the union. In states like Florida, we were able to pass, after 10 years of very hard work, paycheck protection, which says that districts can no longer take union dues directly out of the paychecks of their teachers. Just like every other app and service that we have, they have to sign up and they have to see it come out of their bank account every month. And that has significantly reduced the teachers' union participation, to the extent that now this longer standing law of decertification in Florida, which we really didn't get to use much because of the district's kind of support of the unions, those unions are now falling below that decertification mark, and they're having to recertify unions. So it just gives us an opportunity to get in there and talk to teachers about what benefit is this providing to you, and do you know that your money is actually going towards these radical causes. So those are just a couple, but I completely agree with Lindsay. We've worked together and talked extensively about teacher certification reform. It's one of the pillars that we're working on at AFPI in the states as well. We talk about education freedom for families. Educator freedom means being able to teach without going through these hoops of certification or teacher colleges. And so those are reforms that we're working on here as well. Michael.
Yes, Lindsay, just bring up Janice though. Would the department really start to push all of these fantastic Supreme Court cases that we have? Because there are still states that are using Blaine amendments as excuses for halting school choice and education freedom, and we have Montana versus Espinoza, we have the Maine case. So I think that would go a long way, and Janice, yes ma'am, please.
Noted.
Thank you.
And also, as these cases come about, I know AFPI has a very strong and aggressive legal team, so we would also be happy to be more on the offense. That's something that we've been talking about a lot. You know, the left has always been on offense when it comes to the court systems, especially when it comes to fighting against education reforms and school choice. We are looking at ways that we can be on the offense on these types of things, finding cases that can help to turn the decisions back into our direction, whether it comes to Blaine or other opportunities. So Jessica, I don't know if she's here, but leads our legal team. Jessica's time in and would love to talk to anyone who has opportunities that we can get aggressive on those things. Any other questions? Yes.
Are you guys doing any work on college and university accreditation? And I know I'm moving away from K-12 here a little bit, but that's been an ongoing conversation that it's been kind of a brick wall for a lot of universities that want to get accredited to access things like Pell Grants and so on and so forth. What kind of work is going on in that front?
Yes, great moves by the department on that front.
Yeah, so I did mention accreditation when it comes to Harvard and some of these other universities, so alerting their accreditors to the fact that there are some violations in place vis-a-vis anti-Semitism on broader accreditation reform issues. So the one big beautiful bill, sorry, OB3, does have some accreditation reform language in it. So we're at the very early stages of looking at implementation of OB3 when it comes to accreditation. We just announced, I think already, hopefully we've already announced it, but this morning that we're opening up negotiated rulemaking around some of the higher end provisions in the one big beautiful bill. So we're thinking through all of that right now.
And I know that Florida recently announced collaboration with several other states to create a new accreditor. There was some opening up of the accreditation, allowing for new accreditors to come into the market, especially as a collaboration of states. I wish I could name the other states because I want to recognize them as well, but certainly I know Florida was one of the lead states in that collaboration, and they're moving forward with creating that alternate accreditor. I think I would agree that the teachers' unions, the federal bureaucracy, and the accreditation cartel, that is the cartel, right? They are a key component of what is blocking true reforms, innovators, and new entrants into the market, blocking what we need in a free market competitive environment in education. So it's a great question. Last question. I'll look over here in the... Yes.
One thing that always bothered me when I read about our old friend Bill Ayers and how in the world he got into the position on the boards that he's on with this very progressive education, funded by, I believe it was the Annenberg Foundation, giving him tons of money to spread around, and Bill Ayers' model for education came from A.S. Neal, the Scotsman who started the Summerhill School in the UK, which their philosophy, I'll get to that in a second, their philosophy had a lot of impact in the 30s, kind of fell out of favor, but came back with, a bang in the 60s and 70s. His philosophy was, he didn't want to do academics, that's boring. We want to teach children on an emotional level, that we don't want to discipline them because we believe that they will outgrow their savage tendencies. And especially recognize that their sexuality should never be anything to be ashamed of, and they should express it freely. This is going on over 100 years ago. And so what do we do about these philosophies that are in the teachers' colleges, going back to critical theory from Germany?
That's right. Yeah.
I'm going to start because one of the things that we didn't quite mention was the revocation of some of the Biden-era guidance out there, or actually this was Obama-era guidance, Obama-era guidance around discipline, which actually resulted in the Parkland shooting. You can draw a direct line between the Obama-era guidance around lax discipline policies, to your point, coming rooted in that philosophy that then did not report concerns about this individual and others in Broward County, and ensured that they were not on the radar about after previous incidents, to where he was able to then purchase a firearm and unfortunately commit a tragic act. So that was one of the first things that Linda McMahon and her team did, was revoke those policies. So no longer incentivizing or even directing school districts to ignore discipline issues. That culturally, though, has to be rooted out in a way that has to be very aggressive. I was a school board member, as you probably know, and that guidance came out when I was on the school board. And I remember thinking, this is incentivizing us not to punish kids at the first sign of discipline. And with someone with 3 boys, you know, if you let them get away with something the first time, what are they going to do the next time? They're not going to do the same thing. They're going to push even further. And so we've allowed that to permeate in our schools to where they are very dangerous. It goes back to the persistently dangerous schools, to where they weren't even feeling the need to report to the federal government these incidents and provide an out for parents. So I think all of these things are working together, but to your point, it is a long-standing issue in the schools. It is a cultural issue. It's not something that's going to be solved by a letter, or even necessarily by defining it in policy and allowing parents to opt out. What has helped, though, is the transparency that the COVID-19 era provided to parents. Because parents could see that even on a Zoom, that students were not respecting the classroom, the teacher. They were being taught things that are contrary to many of the parents' values. They were not being taught rigorous academic instruction, but more social emotional learning. And parents really woke up to what's actually going on in the education system in all of those different areas through that pulling back of the curtain during the pandemic. And that's what's given rise to a lot of what we've talked about today. So thank you so much for the question. Do you have anything to add?
I'll just add that that's why they call it the long march through the institutions, right? I mean, it took it, and you're right. I mean, they implanted themselves in Columbia 100 years ago and started this critical theory, what we came known to be critical theory effort many, many years ago. So, I think there are a lot, to Erica's point, there are a lot of facets to this. I think higher ed is key. Go back to the colleges of education, again, I sound like a broken record, but moving states away from saying, by default, we're gonna look at the colleges of ed as our training grounds for future teachers, when we know they are wholly captured by the woke left. Thinking about how we provide alternative teacher certification to make sure that they don't have to go through colleges of ed if they want to teach. And then just as a general matter, making sure that American universities serve American interests. And I would argue that much of what we've seen over the past few decades runs counter to that. And so there's a big course correction underway right now, and a lot of it has to do with what you articulated.
Well, thank you again to my guest, Lindsay Burke, who's going to do an incredible job. Thanks to Heather and Kaylee and Javon for joining us as well and for speaking out. And I know we have some refreshments and some opportunity for some networking for all of you who care about these issues, and I'm going to hand it over to Greg just for some final words.
Erica, thank you.
Well, I think we're in good hands with Secretary McMahon and Lindsay and Erica. I think the children of America are in good hands, so thank y'all so much. And based on what we heard, oh my goodness, the future is bright. Hire. Like, you guys need some internships? We got some. So I'm so grateful to Erica, Lindsay, for y'all. This wonderful conversation. Let's keep the conversation going, and this is just the start of something I think that will truly change the country. So thank y'all for joining us today.